name is Shannon Sclafani. I'm the Executive Director of ULI Michigan, and I am so thrilled to be able to welcome you all this morning to our first quarter for the Women's Leadership Initiative Build Up Breakfast series of 2025. We have an excellent group of women with us here today, and we have an excellent group of women who are meeting all over the country. So welcome to all of the ladies who are in Atlanta and Tampa and New York City and Nashville and others. We are so thrilled to have you all joining the 7 groups of women that are meeting across the state of Michigan with us this morning. And I am really thrilled to introduce the topic to you this morning, as is relevant, I think, particularly at this point in time, more than maybe we've ever seen. We wanted to have a discussion about what it means to lead through change and transition, what that looks like for women in particular, what it looks like for women in the real estate industry, what it looks like for policy and perhaps protecting policy from transition and change. And so we've got a really excellent group of women who are also joining us from around the country. And so we've got perspectives coming from New York City, from Tampa, and from Atlanta this morning, facilitated by our ever-talented Jen Rigterink from the Michigan Municipal League. So we're so thrilled to have you all here. We're so thrilled to have this discussion. And I am going to pass it over to you, Jen, to be our fearless leader for the morning.
Thanks, Shannon. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be a part of this great panel that we're kicking off this year's Breakfast Clubs with. As Shannon said, I'm Jen Rigterink. I work with the Michigan Municipal League. I am our Assistant Director of State and Federal Affairs. My policy issue areas cover economic development and land use. So a lot of planning and zoning, a lot of real estate development incentives. And previous to my time at the MML, I was at our Michigan Economic Development Corporation. So shout out to the MEDC folks online here today. I'm really excited to have this panel discussion today. I think we all will get a lot out of it. But before we jump into the discussion, I'm going to have our speakers introduce themselves. Lucia, do you want to start?
Sure. Good morning and thank you. I'm Lucia Garsys. I started life as an urban planner in Chicago, doing a lot of redevelopment work, and have pivoted and have had transitions in my life over the couple of decades of my entire career. But I too have focused in land use infrastructure and financing, helping local governments and developers come together for very productive partnerships. I was in Hillsborough County as a senior executive until April of last year, where my pivoting that was so successful for decades didn't work in a political environment. And so I left. I didn't retire. I called it rewiring. And using all my rewiring skills, I feel like Mary Poppins with a big bag of all kinds of ideas and tricks. I've just recently launched Siela Strategies to help developers and local governments negotiate healthy, productive relationships. I am a longtime ULI member. I have found sanity in ULI when things all around me have gone bananas at the local level and also at the national level. So happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Shelita?
Good morning, everyone. I am Shelita Compton, and welcome from Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm a proud member of the ULI, WLI chapter here, proud chair of the Changemakers Committee here in the Atlanta market. And also I want to say happy Mardi Gras. I'm also from New Orleans, Louisiana, and today's Mardi Gras. So I have to say happy Mardi Gras to everyone. I am currently the Director of Real Estate for Atlanta Housing. I'm very happy to be here in this organization and being part of the mission to develop and create affordable housing throughout the city of Atlanta. I'm in my past life within commercial real estate here, and I've pretty much spent most of my time here in Atlanta since leaving home. And I've worked in development and working with low income tax credits, and also worked on market rate development. And prior to that, also as a real estate appraiser and valuing all types of different properties, including multifamily. So it's just really exciting to be here at Atlanta Housing. I'm so excited to be here, to be a part of this group. ULI, WLI is just the best in the world. So I just, anytime they ask me to come, I'll definitely be there. So I'm happy to be here this morning.
Thank you. Caleigh?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Good morning. I'm Caleigh Bader. I'm an executive recruiter at Jackson Lucas. We focus on placing top talent all across commercial real estate. So we work closely with firms on everything from hiring strategies to team build out, compensation consulting, and succession planning. We really cover the whole map and the market on a national scale, finding the right people for roles. Mostly I work on currently investment, acquisitions, real estate finance, asset management, and development type roles. But again, we work across the board. I am a born and raised New Yorker where we are headquartered. I currently live in Brooklyn, and I actually went to undergrad at the University of Michigan. So love the University of Michigan and the ULI Michigan connection. And I've been to some of the incredible events that they've held here in New York as well. Yeah, I love what I do, in terms of connecting people and helping companies grow with the right talent. And I'm very excited to be here today.
Great, thank you. So as we dive into this discussion focused on navigating transitions, we're really going to explore how political, organizational, and career transitions impact leadership in real estate. So to kick it off here, let's talk about how political transitions have affected your work, Shelita.
Oh, wow. It has definitely impacted my work. Right now at Atlanta Housing, we're just, as every organization is doing right now, we're just kind of reevaluating everything. And so we received some notices, and then some notices are taken back. So there's a lot of uncertainty in the market right now. And so what the things that we're doing is one, we're just kind of taking a step back and just trying to see exactly what's out there in the landscape. Two, the main thing is we're having lots of listening sessions and discussions with our organization. Unfortunately, right now there's a lot of uncertainty. So everyone is just wondering, okay, well, what's going to happen here? Where are we going there? How does this impact these things? And some things we can answer, and there are a lot of questions we can't answer. But what we do is try to take the time to really listen to our employees and staff and team members, and just kind of see what their concerns are, take those back and try to address them as best as we can. And so we're doing that in different ways. We're also looking as far as, what our mission is in different ways that we can do complete our mission, in terms of looking at other creative ideas for partnerships, different ways for alignment, different ways, sources of funding, just looking at different ways that we can go ahead and address the affordable housing issues, and looking at different product types, and looking at how else we can work with our portfolio. And in a way, it's a little challenging, but it's also kind of exciting at the same time, because it's allowing us to take a step back and really kind of reevaluate things in a different way and look at things differently. And so that's one thing that's kind of nice, but it is challenging when there's a big transition. But everyone always had transitions before, and we've been through it before. We'll get through it. We got through it then. We're going to get through things now.
Lucia, I know that you started out working in local government, and so I'm interested to hear, how transitions have played into your work, especially transitioning from local government into more of the private sector, and if you could share with us on that.
Sure. And I'm happy to share too, because I think amongst us, I was one that spent several decades in a highly political environment, worked in a local government, a county government that had 7 elected commissioners and no strong chair or mayor. And so a lot of it was every 2 years trying to figure out which new commissioner has which agenda. And I navigated that quite successfully for a number of years, and really trying to understand where each of them was coming from and what their agendas were and how I could serve them best. And over the years, I've been able to accommodate and let a staff of a lot of people and provided cover for them also in that. But I think what has happened is the political environment has become so divisive, and it is really hard to find a middle somewhere. We had 7 votes, and our deal was try to find 4 votes, shoot for the middle. But over the years, that has become difficult to find because of very personal agendas and very personal desired outcomes. And so, quite frankly, in the most recent set of elections before I left, there were really a number of commissioners that were elected that I couldn't connect with, and I couldn't find it. And when you make decisions in real estate or local government, they're very long lasting. And so it was pivoting from increase impact fees, reduce impact fees, make development easy, make development hard, growth, no growth. And I was able to do that until this very last round of elections for me, which just created an environment that I could no longer navigate. And so it really was kind of a transition out of local government for me. Lots of soul searching, lots of, validation. We get our validation from work. And so recognizing that I was not going to be the person who could make a difference in the local government anymore, and somebody else had to step up to the plate, and recognizing that over the years, in this particular case, it was just personal agendas, and I had to come to terms with that.
Yeah, and I think that echoes at the local level, the state and the federal level. Working with our state legislature, our House of Representatives overturns or has elections every 2 years. So as soon as someone can find the bathroom, they're running for reelection. And so it kind of makes it difficult. And I think there's a good lesson there that, no matter what kind of industry or what work you're doing, if you are working with elected officials, you have to remember that you may be in opposition of something, in one time, and then you need to work with them on a whole totally different issue. And so, you want to make sure you don't burn bridges where we're all passionate about the work we do. But our house just flipped. So folks, for the last 2 years that you weren't maybe given a lot of attention to are now in the majority. And so I definitely think as that transitions, you just got to remember, you never know who you might have to work with down the road. Caleigh, as in the work that you do and just in your job, what strategies are you using or are you looking to use to stay ahead of changes when you're looking for leadership for these, when you're doing those executive searches?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, for us, it's always just knowledge is power. I would say staying up to date in your industry. We think of ourselves, I think, as adjacent to the industries that we work in. So, it's really, we are a part of the commercial real estate industry. And so in that way, it's going to conferences and networking and staying in contact with people and being one step ahead. We saw this article online. We saw you're going to be hiring. We saw that XYZ policy will eventually come into play. How can we be there? How can we be on, the front lines for you and first in the door when something like that happens? And, less on a transactional sense as well. I think we're big believers in what goes around comes around. So I think a lot of those relationships pay off when you have, maintained them over the years. And so whether that is, this is a more junior candidate that I grabbed a coffee with 5 years ago, and then maybe down the line they remember and think of me when a search comes up. I think it's just about maintaining those relationships, keeping an open mind, and kind of putting yourself in the front because, it's not our place to run someone's company, but we definitely have suggestions and we've seen what works and what doesn't. So we're really just there as, the family therapist, if it's a family company, which happens a lot, the resource, and someone to listen when things do come up and kind of navigate that to the best of our abilities.
Right. talking about, leadership in organizations, how can leaders effectively navigate internal transitions? Caleigh, I think we'll
Yeah.
start with you and then I'll pass that on to someone else.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, yeah, so I think there's obviously a difference between when we navigate transitions in terms of hiring versus an internal transition, maybe at somebody else's company. I would say, when we're evaluating for leadership roles, there are a few main things that come into play, and especially in the light of, a women's panel and gender. Being skilled in your craft or your vertical does not necessarily translate to being a good manager or leader. And I think that there's a time and place for each of those. Some people don't always need to manage people, and that doesn't make them successful. But in a lot of the roles that we see, it will end up being a factor, at least down the line. And so, it kind of creates this catch-22 situation where you need leadership experience to get leadership experience. And that's a really interesting point, a turning point, because a lot of times those roles will only be offered to people that have the previous experience. So the challenge becomes distinguishing, biases when you're aware of them in the decision-making process, because so much of it comes down to interpersonal factors. For us, we really have the liberty to only work on high-level roles where all the candidates are going to be qualified on paper. So, if we're evaluating for things like presentation, etiquette, and performance, people do tend to gravitate towards people that are similar to them. So what can the implication be for female candidates? Or when you're talking about, any subsector of diversity, right? How are we ensuring that we are evaluating people genuinely based on their character rather than filtering them through a lens of gender or whatever it may be? And so I think, when we're looking out for things like resilience, transparency, empathy, drive, and again, sometimes previous experience, you really do have to manage that transition by sticking to character and examples of what we've seen in the past and referrals from people rather than trying to just create some, homogenous echo chamber. And so I think it's really about building trust and open communication and, moving forward, seeing how people sometimes react to change and then just, editing that along the way as you go.
Caleigh, that's so
Shelita,
interesting.
yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
I was just gonna comment, it just when Caleigh mentioned empathy, and I had to pause a little bit because I value empathy, and I think it's a very a key characteristic to find in candidates and in team members and just in all organizations. I'm hoping that that's still a characteristic that's valued at this point, because it's just sometimes it seems like that's not necessarily the case. It's usually, who has that hard skill set or who has, this certain relationship. But it is nice to see that empathy and leadership and just to be able to reach out and care for your team members. I think that's a beautiful thing. So that was just something that kind of struck my head.
Yeah.
Jennifer, if I might, I think building on Shelita's point, the empathy becomes really important when you are the leader. And I think when an organization causes change for somebody, it's a reduction in force, it's a reduction in budget or something, that leader, I think, needs to help folks pivot if they can, but also to help them understand that some of these decisions just come and they're not personal. So it's either finding an alternative for them. And that doesn't necessarily come at the moment of change. I think that's something a good leader can prepare people within their team to do when the sun is shining, if you will. So, to Shelita's point, that empathy and understanding how to build team members who can pivot and be resilient to change becomes a critical point.
I agree. And I feel also, as far as with that pivoting, is having that alignment. It's actually working with your team members and aligning them to their strengths and not necessarily just guiding towards what there's certain things that the organization is looking for and things, but there's also every person have their inherent strength something that they bring to the table. And that's something that we can really look at to try to, even when there's a reorganization or things of that nature, but if you can align that person to one of the things that they really would like to do and the things that are just inherently it's comfortable for them, then that's a win-win. So I think that's really important to really reach out to everyone and just kind of talk to them and, what is it that you want to do? What is your dream opportunity in 5 years? What are the things that you're working towards? And then taking a step back and seeing, okay, well, what can we do to not only establish or to work towards our mission for the organization, but also work towards your goals as well.
Yeah, and I think that goes to an interesting point of the kind of dual investment from junior and senior people, and that ultimately realizing down the line, finding that niche for somebody is going to be more beneficial than, reducing your workforce and having to hire down the line. Because most people are, somewhat ineffective for the first few months while they're being trained, and you end up ultimately wasting resources. And it's interesting, we talk a little bit about this concept of, like, I call it pockets of purpose, which means that I think not everybody needs to be, saving the world in their quote unquote sense. But I think what's important is that you do find some pocket of meaningful work in what you do. And so, I think a lot of people have a voice in the back of their head that always says, I need to be doing more. I'm not going to be fulfilled until I get to XYZ goal. And whatever that metric is for some people, I think everyone is driven by different things in life. I do think a lot of people need to find at least some little slice of meaning or purpose in their niche. And so, for me personally, I found that I gravitated a lot towards real estate. As someone who grew up here, it was very tangible to me. I had family members that worked in the industry. It just made sense. And then in terms of how I stay fulfilled day to day in making placements, it's connecting with women and candidates of color and putting diverse people in positions of power and empowering them and, doing executive coaching and working with organizations, maybe on a repetitive basis to make sure that we're actually building out a team. And so whatever that is in which you see it through, it doesn't mean that you're on the front lines changing policy necessarily, but at least making effective change in your own organization and being invested in the long-term growth. And I think from a senior person, that's how they can see that a junior person is invested, and vice versa, knowing that your manager or leader has the investment in you to truly grow with the organization rather than, just maybe like the up and out method is ultimately going to build a strong team down the line.
Yeah, I think this is a great conversation, and to kind of bring it, around to women in particular. How do you believe that women's unique ability to lead both professionally and personally, shapes their approach to leading through change?
Women are so much better at it. No. but honestly, I mean, women are very detail oriented. That's the thing I just always find very interesting. It's like this. Yes, there are leaders and things of that nature, but women just inherently just kind of think of all the different details and background. If you're given a task, okay, so we're here, we want to get to here. Who are the key players there? Who are the decision makers? What do I need to do to move that forward? For other leaders, it's like, okay, I want to go there, let's just get it, And I just think women are just we're multitaskers. We can juggle different things. I always joke around, someone asked me whether I can multitask. I was like, I'm sorry. I was a mother tending to my baby in the backseat of the car while driving a stick and taking a call and going to work. I can multitask, but it's just, those are some of the things that, that women, we always multitask and always handling so many different things at home and always handling things for your family and just for your siblings. And we're just typically all for everybody. So I just think women in general, I'm biased, but I think we're better leaders.
There was a point in my life where, to Shelita's point, I was doing much the same. My children were under my desk on a Saturday coloring and going to town hall meetings. And I really thought of writing a book that was something like Management by Motherhood, because I found those skills that you were helping your children with. And now, by the way, with my elderly mother, it's like you have a choice. You can wear this or this. And then I found myself giving that same advice to elected officials with alternatives. We have a choice. You can pick this or this. And so I think we're innately wired that way to accommodate, to be empathetic, to realize what people's needs are, and then layer on top of that the ability to just juggle all of it.
Yeah, I want to share just quickly an article that I read recently from the Harvard Business Review that's called Why Women Don't Apply for Jobs Unless They're 100% Qualified. And it basically just goes on to explore, I recommend reading it, the gender gap in job applications. And, the common assumption is that women lack confidence, which is why they wouldn't apply to a job unless they check 10 out of the 10 boxes. But the research actually suggests that that's not the case. And the reason is that they interpret the criteria differently. So they see them as strict requirements rather than guidelines. And then it goes on to say that men ultimately only apply if they're 60% qualified. And so the women think that they will not be considered for a job and it'll be a waste of their time. And that's interesting because I think we'd see it as, again, like a lack of confidence or an insecurity. I can't apply if I'm not qualified. But it's not that they're saying they're not qualified. They're just saying, I won't be considered, so why waste my time? And I think if you see that, with a positive undertone, kind of on the flip, it's about optimizing productivity. And I think, as we know, which has been studied, most women are overqualified in the fields that they're in, especially as compared to their male counterparts. And so I think it just goes to show the level of dedication and commitment to a craft that a woman will take on before she feels comfortable, especially being responsible for other characters and individuals in that situation. So yeah, just a really interesting study, like in terms of also the preconceived notions that we might have about why women might not do it in the first place, when in reality, that's actually not even the truth.
Yeah.
And your women are definitely confident. And I think women feel that they have to check all the different boxes because history have shown before when they were fighting to get up to those corporate ladders that basically they had to, to do all the things or do at least twice as much. And that's particularly for African American women, that we always say we have to do twice as much to be accepted for the same amount of work. So I think just history was just like, well, we got to check off this, and that in order to even consider to apply, which is unfortunate because so many women could do such a great job. And not to mention, not only can they do that job, they're empathetic and they consider they're great team leaders. They're great leaders as far as bringing other people into the fold as well. So that's an interesting study as far as men only select 60% of the criteria in order to apply. That's interesting.
And we always see it in practice too. I will always get the question from women more than men. Oh, you sent over the job description. I just want to mention preemptively, I just want to put an asterisk. I really only have, 2 to 3 years of experience, 10 to 20, whatever it is. I know this really said 25 plus. And I had a woman that I was prepping for a COO role. And she said, I just want to make it clear before I go in, I really haven't covered whatever it was, this aspect, the 10th out of 10th box, like just this specific, niche on the investments. And we said, a man would never bring that up. A man would bring up a parallel scenario, which is actually probably not even that parallel, and say that they've done it 100 times over. They've done those reps a million times in the past. And so I think it's just, saying that there are so many situations in life, whether it is being a mother or any aspect of womanhood, that probably does translate to this and is probably just as translatable as the example that, maybe a man is using to be in that same position.
So Caleigh, so how many women actually go request more salary than the male counterparts in those type of positions?
It's hard because it's actually illegal in the state of New York to ask people their current compensation. So it's interesting because the question that we have to ask is, what are your compensation expectations? And I think if you do it for long enough, you kind of, you start to know what people are priced at certain companies and firms. And I will say again, this is an inexact statistic, but I tend to see men inflate their compensation more so. I think we just know market, and I say I'm in your court. It's really only my benefit to help you. I just legally can't ask you your compensation. Some people give it up pretty easily because again, it's not helping them to hide it. I think you either price yourself out of a role, and of course you don't want to downplay yourself, but I do tend to see either women give up the number pretty quickly or say that they're happy with a lateral move or something within the realm, whereas I think men will inflate it like 10, 20% more than just to see what they can get out of it. And sometimes they'll change along the process. It starts, oh, I wanted X number. Well, now what about my bonus? And oh, well, now it's halfway through the year. So they're going to buy me out of that. And well, this is my guaranteed raise for the next year. And, I think it starts to, but yeah, it's a really interesting practice in, sometimes hiring managers do want the cheaper person. So maybe that would actually move the needle a little bit more towards the women, but you'll ultimately end up paying less. And then as the recruiter as well, that won't benefit me. So, I'd love to gather some real data on it. It's a great question.
I think we're talking about some of these skills already, but how do you think skills, empathy, compassion, multitasking can be leveraged in leadership roles? More so than just in their everyday work. How should you talk about, I would think if you're interviewing, most women aren't going to be like, I have a family, so I'm a great multitasker. So how do you emphasize these skills and not bring it back to gender?
That is a very good question. I guess the one way I would look at it as far as just laying out, use especially when you having these interviews and these discussions, just kind of laying out the different projects that you work on. And a lot of times we are assigned a certain task, but you usually take on a number of other tasks or some things that have to be done in order for this portion to be successful. So I think it's just kind of taking a step back and looking at exactly detailing all the things that you've done, whereas yes, you might have worked as a manager for this portion of it, but you're working with this construction team and there was an issue and that you actually chased down the concern as far as where is this coming from, how do we get this resolved, how do we push this through so that we can get the right approvals and the right inspection, so it's just I think as far as just detailing more so everything that you actually work on together in order to make a certain project come together in the end.
I think the other thing is, you mentioned multitasking, empathy, and I forgot the third one, but
Compassion.
I think the question is, are you working in an organization that values that? Because, oftentimes we value it. I personally value it. But I have found myself, when I have expressed those values in a different leadership scenario, it isn't necessarily welcome. So it's almost, I have to do it without senior leadership understanding that that's what I'm doing. So it's almost becomes a covert operation, if you will, to get to those things that I feel are really important in leadership.
So how are you seeing that workplace challenges for women have evolved or remain the same across generations? And I think that speaks to, Lucia, a little bit what you're talking about of if your workplace or organization doesn't prop up certain aspects, doesn't have that culture, are we seeing a shift, from generation to generation?
So that's interesting. ULI Tampa Bay just had a couple of months ago a WLI event, and we called it the Eras Tour, which really was women of 5 different generations on a panel talking about those issues that they face in daily life. I come from that era where, I had to dress like a man with a little bow that resembled a tie and act, I had to act like a guy to the extent I could. It has changed a little bit, But there are some very fundamental issues that we're talking about here that still cross all generations. And the notion of empathy and the ability to multitask and to try to balance, that seems to still exist regardless of what generation you're talking about. It got to some nuances that were, the example that I loved is, if you're in a boardroom or around a conference table and a woman is being dismissed, her voice is not being heard by whoever is conducting the meeting, how do you, as that woman, behave? And the answer that came out, which I thought was really curious, was that women may not stand up for themselves, but other women have stood up for them. So other women have said, hey, wait a minute, that was her idea. She had that idea. We need to pursue it. So there's this really, I think, emerging network of women finding ways to support one another in an environment that may not be productive for them by helping one another. So they'll speak for one another, but they may not speak for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's great. You know, women helping to advance other women, those who are coming after them, to help them learn from, you know, the trials and tribulations that you've already faced, versus I know in some, you know, environments, sometimes there can be more of a competitiveness versus looking at it as let's all try to continue to do good work and move forward versus I want to get farther than you. I think, because I think that's healthy. And I also still think women in certain environments by certain people are treated differently. I know personally that stating something in a legislative meeting, because it's coming from me, it's taken as aggressive versus if the person next to me, who is a male, said the same thing, they might get high-fived. So, I mean, I still think there's some of that coming around. Now, I am very lucky to work with some great male colleagues who are very aware of those situations too, and tend to correct them after the fact, or, you know, ask, hey, are you okay? You know, after dealing with something like that. So I think we can all find great colleagues, you know, regardless of gender, that are helping to advance women, and or making sure that in situations and things we are treated the same as everyone else in those rooms or at those tables.
I think it's fortunate
that
that, oh, go ahead.
No, I do think that women helping women is emerging in the new cohorts. It was not, I mean, some of my biggest challenges were women of my same cohort or generation, and that was a very competitive and sometimes really ugly kind of environment. So I'm just really excited about the new generations and new cohorts supporting one another.
And I'm excited that, yes, things are definitely changing. We have a lot more examples of phenomenal women leaders. I'm happy at Atlanta Housing. Our CEO is the wonderful Terry Lee, and she's just taking things over and just doing phenomenal things. So it's wonderful to have those examples. And then also too, I think, you know, we're being allowed to be a little bit more of ourselves, you know, to Lucia's point, that we don't have to try to dress like them. We don't necessarily, it's okay if you don't like to play golf, you know, it's okay that you have other interests and things of that nature. But also too, with that, we have to be comfortable within ourselves. We have to be okay to be your true self in front of others, not to shy away from different topics, and not to shy away from discussing things that are important to you. And I think before, you know, generations before in the past, we just kind of we'll just kind of sit and listen and just try to take things in. And I think now, especially now, it's very important for us to kind of be true to yourself, be your whole self, speak your mind, say the things that are important and speak out when you think that things are not right. And I think that's very critical. And I think that's great that women leaders are in place to do that.
And I think that adding on to that, there's always going to be a hierarchy of privilege wherever you are. And that's just an unfortunate truth and something that we will always continue to challenge. But I guess the question is, how do we navigate it? And I think one of the greatest strengths that I've seen that women have is definitely a read of people. I think a lot of people, not just men, like to hear themselves talk, but I think women have definitely a sensitivity and an intuition and a way to read people that I think, I think they pick up on a lot of nuances that a lot of men are maybe sometimes surprised by. I think also the question is, a lot of commercial real estate is incredibly male dominated, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And so, I struggled recently with putting a woman, a young female, into a role at a very male dominated firm. And I said, this is going to be great for them. We want to expand the women that work there, but also for her own benefit, do I want to put her in an environment where I don't know if she'll thrive as much? And so then you have, again, this catch-22. It's incredibly cyclical, where it's, let's build out, and this is not just with women, diverse practices. And that can be diversity of thought and look in every sector. But how are we going to continue to make the system more diverse when you don't necessarily want to put those people in a position that you're not sure that they're going to thrive to the best of their ability in? And so, I think these women can read for themselves a lot of the time and navigate. That's, why you go through interview processes and why you have a recruiter to advocate for you or someone like that. And it can be really important in those processes, someone that can speak up for you in terms of compensation and benefits and needs. And I think sometimes even just having that middleman, not because women are afraid to speak up, but because everyone should be owed what they deserve. And a lot of people are underpaid. And it doesn't mean that in your next role, you should make less just because you have in the past. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a complete cycle of navigating those systems and also putting yourself in a position to be successful. But I do find that actually when I was an undergrad, I initially wanted to go into social work or therapy as a route. And I find that I totally am now, because it's a completely different type of therapy. But I think that there is a really strong read of character that comes with this stuff. And I think that is just a skill that I think can be taught and learned, but will get you far in any field that you're in life.
See, and that is so challenging. It's just that, I understand that you want to be cautious as far as putting a person where they feel they can thrive, but there are these environments where many of them are very male dominated, and really maybe the environment needs to accommodate the new leader. So I mean, it's challenging, and I know I'm saying that I understand the reality of things in terms of there are complications, and it's going to be there's steps to take in order for people to kind of come around to this new leader or this new environment. It's interesting. I read a book recently. I forgot the name of the book, but it was about this woman being put into a male environment. And he was like, okay, we're going to this team meeting. We're going to go to this team building seminar. And it was like it was for all males. And she was like, well, I can't go because I'm a woman. They're like, and it just didn't even dawn on them. It was like, oh, we can't do that. So it's interesting. So there's definitely those times for transitions, but it's so important to have those first people in there and to be the one to kind of step your foot in there and just kind of be that first person, because that's the only way change can happen, unfortunately.
I think the other thing women do really well is in the kind of environment we work in, that takes a team of an architect, a lawyer, an engineer, a broker. Women can find a way to translate the language. So for me, it was being in a room full of engineers and trying to figure out, what are you really saying and how does that impact the deal that we're talking about here? And so, is it the empathy? Is it the awareness? Kelly, I don't know what it is, but it's that ability to take
Me neither.
disparate dialects and try to figure out what their message is, and then to be able to deliver it in a way that everybody can understand.
Yeah,
exactly.
when you were describing, putting someone in there and caring if they thrive or not, one, I think is distinctive sometime to just caring about the person you are working with. But trailblazer kept coming, the word trailblazer kept coming up to me, because I think, that situation and that woman, if she's placed in that and she does start to succeed and thrive, then placing another woman there, or someone that is just different than how the culture and the makeup of the organization has been, makes that step just a little bit softer maybe for the next person, or easier. I don't want to say, because 9 times out of 10, nothing is easier, but it's not.
You just get
as
better at it,
different.
and then you get
Yeah.
more challenging tasks.
Right. People don't like change. I think that's just built into all of us sometimes, and how we, initially react to change. But I think, those individuals who take that first step only create, more opportunities for those to come behind them. So.
And I think as long as you're part of oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, sometimes it's not even just as far as gender. Sometimes it's just kind of not doing what the group is doing. So, I mean, one example is, I remember attending an ICSC conference, years ago, and of course you go to all these parties, and then they were known for their big parties, and everyone gets together, and they were all just having drinks and things, and it was great. But at the time, I chose not to drink. So, so I'm with this group, and they were like, well, here's take a shot. And I was like, oh, no, thank you. I don't want a shot. Oh, come on, take a shot. And I'm just like, well, I don't need to take a shot. But it was funny. So I found myself, I had to then start cracking jokes and things just to kind of make people comfortable. That it's just like, hey, you do your thing. I'm much more fun without the shot. So but there are times like that where, if you're not necessarily, not even just the same gender, or just partaking in the same activity and things, that that you can feel either left out, or feel like you're doing something wrong when you're not doing anything wrong. You're just doing something differently, and that's when you just kind of have to Lucia's point, just kind of come with a different way, a different way to navigate those different entries, so that everyone is okay.
Right. Well, we have a question in the chat. So, when thinking about projects that are tied to policy or leadership priorities, how can you be thinking ahead to minimize the impact of the project? I think many people are probably facing this right now, with some of the uncertainty with funding at the federal level, and just wondering with the downsize in staff, particularly. I'm sure many with us today work with HUD funding. And so how do you think about change, and how do you keep trudging forward, not knowing, or there being some uncertainty there with projects?
Very cautiously. That's at Atlanta Housing. The one thing that Terry wants us to, we still have our mission. That's the thing. It's like, yes, we have lots of changes, we have different things, but we still want to provide affordable housing. So the way we do that is just, we continue doing the things we've been doing. We try to kind of take a look at different ways to do them. But, yes, there's always uncertainty, and there's things, coming ahead. So what we try to do too, as well as, we also look ahead a little bit and just try to anticipate what the needs are, or anticipate what information we need to provide, or anticipate, so it's a little bit of the trudging forward, anticipating, but also just kind of, just taking evaluate some things as far as how we can continue to proceed. But our mission is the same. It's just like, no matter what happens with anything, we have to provide a way to provide affordable housing to the citizens of Atlanta. And we're going to do that. And that's the only thing we can do.
I think Shelita's point about anticipating, I think that's another thing women tend to do really well, is just kind of forecast what the possible consequences are. The other thing that I think women do well in these uncertain times is figuring out how to make lemonade out of lemons. And so, you know, yes, it's all just sort of crumbling, but are there opportunities for us in this environment to shift to, and Shelita, I'm not saying this is what you need to do, but does philanthropy step up? You know, if you can't do it with HUD funding, what are the alternatives? And I think that seeking creative alternatives and being innovative, at least when you have women around the table, they're like, let's try this. What about this? And so I think that's another kind of ingredient that makes women resilient, and being able to be resilient leaders as well to their organizations.
And that's what I was mentioning earlier as far as being exciting. It's just, you know, that we are thinking those different relationships, as you mentioned, as far as, you know, well, maybe we can have a partnership with this organization, and maybe we can work with this CFI, and maybe, you know, so there are different things that we can do in order to still, you know, work towards our mission and get the affordable housing. But, you know, maybe we won't have HUD fully available. Maybe there will be some changes with HUD, and we'll have to, you know, address that when it happens. But at the same time, we are trying to come up with different partnerships and different routes, and looking at, you know, well, maybe we can do a tiny product here instead of, you know, if we're not able to do a single family home, or maybe if multifamily is not going to work here, maybe we can provide some other smaller products to get that information out for residents, for Atlantans to work with.
Well, I can't tell you how grateful I am to have been part of this conversation with you all. And I hope that, you know, all of our ULI friends who are tuning in have gotten a lot out of this. I'm going to kick it over to Shannon, because talking about multitasking, I have just been summoned to a legislative office on an issue that we got going on right now. So I want to thank the Michigan ULI, one, for just starting up these breakfast clubs that have now gone, you know, to all the other clubs or all the other ULI chapters for the most part. And I look forward very much to getting to participate and possibly meet you all in person at a ULI event in the future. So thank you so much, Lucia, Shelita, and Caleigh, for this great conversation. And Shannon, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Yes, thanks so much, Jen. I'm going to continue with just a couple more sort of questions. So Jen messaged me and said, I'm getting summoned to a rep's office. I've got to go. Like, let's do it. So I think, Shelita, you had brought up the word authentic earlier, and it really struck me. And so I wanted to ask the question, do you feel like authenticity is maybe prioritized more in women-led environments? Or whether you're in a leadership position or not, how do you create safer spaces for people to show up authentically, whether it's, you know, to meetings or to projects, or just like in their positions in general?
That's a good question as far as in women-led organizations or businesses. I haven't been in many. This is my first women-led one, so I would say definitely yes to this one. I'm curious if, like, for the Fortune 500 companies, that, you know, if people feel more acceptable to be their authentic selves. But in general, I would say, you know, if you're part of an organization, you know, wherever you are, leader or non-leader or team member or whatever role you play, it's still possible to be authentic. And I think the best way is to just accept your next colleague for who they are, and not expect them to say a certain thing or wear a certain thing, or to to be to even cheer for the same football team. You know what I mean? It's just kind of it's important for you to just be whatever person you are, and it's so critical because if you think about it, you're at our organization, you work most of the day. You're there 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Well, you know, there's remote work, but I mean, but in general, you're at this place. If you're spending so much time being something that you're not, or just being uncomfortable or presenting, that's a miserable environment. It just really is. And I say this from self from personal experiences. When I was coming up in my career, so, you know, especially in commercial real estate, you're trying to, you know, you're just trying to find a way in. You're trying to get in, and you're trying to fit, and you're trying to, you know, say these different things, or I tried very hard to like golf. I really did. And I did that also because my husband loves golf, but that's another story. But
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's okay to like something else, to like weight training, you know. I mean, so it's just I just really want everyone on the call just to take the time and just, you know, if you laugh loud, laugh loud. You know, if you like to talk a little, you talk a little bit more, just talk. You know, if you enjoy putting things together, then fine. If you're a spreadsheet person, then go be that spreadsheet person. You know, have just whatever it is, just be yourself, because ultimately being yourself is going to lead you to be whatever position or whatever person you want to be anyway.
Shannon, I think from someone who spent 6 months with a coach and hiked the Sahara, 110 kilometers in the Sahara to find authentic self, the thing that I would say is it is so critically important. It is the foundation, and it is the foundation for creativity. It is the foundation for who you are, but it also requires self-care. So much like you exercise or eat the right food, I think there's a time for reflection to say, am I being my authentic self? I found myself crusty with all kinds of things and doing things for other people, whether it was political environment or whatever, that I had truly lost that authentic self. And it happens. You don't even know it's happening because you think you're serving somebody doing your work. And all of a sudden you find, ooh, I'm not sure who that is. So before any of you have to travel to the Sahara to find your authentic selves, I would say self-care in that department.
Mm-hmm. And I would say in terms of how to actually implement that and foster that in the workplace, I see something that I think candidates really value is just trust and transparency and open communication, whatever that means. And I think there are a lot of avenues to do that. You know, the biggest one is, of course, in the age of remote work. And I think a huge stigma around Gen Z not being, you know, as hardworking and as motivated. I think fostering that trust and saying, if you are exceeding expectations and you are delivering to the guidelines that have been put in place for you, it, you know, and again, within reason, it doesn't really matter how you get there. And so I think a lot of people have maybe this strict clock in, clock out system, and we need to see you to know that you're delivering your work. But I think if someone is reachable, if they're communicative, and again, so much of this is a gray area, but if they're delivering and they leave the office at 5 p.m. and they're writing emails from their bed for 3 hours, if they're getting that work done and they're saying, you know, I'd rather send this out on a Sunday night versus having to be stressed about it on Monday morning, even if I'm showing face at 8 a.m. I think it's just learning new ways of communication and the new world that we exist in and saying, yeah, maybe I reach out on, you know, XYZ personal platform but I'm reachable. And so again, it goes to the whole people take more vacation, but they spend more of it working. And, you know, maybe we all need to strike a better work-life balance, that means. But I do think that things are going to evolve because the world is just different.
Yeah.
And, you know, for me, a way that I've implemented that is when I showed up at a really small company, which is now mid-size, they were so open to ideas of change. And I said, you know, I would love to hire some more junior women. And, you know, I'm not going to put that on you, but if I take part in the hiring, is that something that you'd be open to? And they were 100% open to it. They were so receptive and communicative. And as a result, we hired, you know, a colleague of mine that I'd known from the past and a whole handful of women to support our team. And, you know, if they grow and then you get that stamp of approval, that's something really powerful moving forward. And I would say how to communicate that from a junior person is any way that you show long-term investment and growth in your company, they will appreciate. So, even giving the signals of when you're hiring for whether it's interns, analysts, senior people, I would love to be a part of that process. I would love to be a part of performance reviews, your marketing team, sitting in on these additional meetings, building out, anything that you're implementing in the future, just showing I have the intentions to be here long term and I want to grow with you is very powerful. And I think that just shows them you are not only concerned about yourself and your promotion and your raise, which are all important and valid things, but you want to see this firm grow as a whole. You want to better us so that we all make more money and we can pay everyone more. I think there's so many ways, and I think it's, again, that goes around, comes around thing, but just showing that you have the long-term investment in growth, and then same thing from your manager that they're duly invested in you as well.
Yeah, I love that. I want to end on just giving everybody one like sort of final thought. If somebody's, sort of in the midst of change right now, or if they are really stressing out when they open up their phones every morning and seeing a lot of change happening around them, what is just sort of like one kind of final thought around, what can you sort of recommend that people do to just protect themselves and, find a through line?
I might say that when change can either happen to you or you can do it by choice. And then there's something in between where change evolves within you or around you. But if happens to you and not by choice, find a way to make it your change, and find a way to make it your choice of what you do. And that's really hard to say for all of those employees now who are losing their jobs, but find a way. It's the fear that keeps us from moving. And so if we can get to the other side of fear by saying, I now have a choice to do something. I wish you that. I wish you that, because it's very, very difficult.
I would say, first of all, just take a step back and just assess, breathe, and make sure everything is going to be okay. But just take an assessment of what's going on in your community, what's going on in your particular world, and also take an assessment of yourself and see if, as Lucia has mentioned, is a change happening to you? What do you need to do? How do you proceed from that standpoint? Or if it's a change around you that you can't really necessarily control, but you still need to work in, take those assessments and see, how can I move forward throughout this change? What things do I need to produce and learn in some cases? We have the transitions right now. We have a big transition with AI, and I think everyone is just kind of just trying to understand, well, what is it? How we work with it? What is that going to do? How can it improve our organizations? Honestly, it's a fabulous tool. There's lots of information you can get from that. So it's just kind of taking an assessment of who you are, where you are, and how you can move forward. And, remember, anytime a door closes, another one opens.
Yeah. And I would just say, the last thing to add on to that is always go into a conversation prepared to have your mind changed. I think, of course, knowledge is power. A lot of people are opinionated, but I think truly one of the greatest markers of intelligence is just having an open mind. And I think anyone, any day, you might see them as inferior to you. You might see them as less knowledgeable, more junior. I'm more junior than every woman here. And you guys have so much knowledge to offer. And I think just going into every conversation, knowing that everybody comes from a different background, a different perspective, and you truly never know when you're going to have your opinion and mind changed. And I think the ability to lack judgment and see things from a different angle is incredibly intelligent.
Thank you so much. If I might just add that building your community and finding a support system of like-minded people around you, and knowing that, there are people that are going through the same things, much like you might find within the ULI WLI system. So thank you so much to everyone. This has been a fascinating discussion. I really feel like we could have come with no questions and had a really great conversation for an hour. but I just really want to express my appreciation for all of you and being so willing to share of yourselves with everyone today. For those of you that are meeting in person, I